It's been a little while, but excited to get back and do one of our studio tours here on Podcasting Tech. Today we were chatting with Kevin Palmieri. He is podcaster, speaker, podcasting coach. He has a show, The Next Level University Podcast, and he's all about self-improvement and helping people with a better life. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Matthew, I appreciate you having me on. Any chance I get to talk about podcasting and all things podcasting, I am always excited. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, glad to have you on. So literally just before we started to hit record, you were telling me what you were doing in life, working for a company that helped out schools improve their energy efficiency. But obviously you're not doing that anymore. So what kind of led you from the 9 to 5 to switch into more of an entrepreneurial life and get into podcasting?
Yeah, when I was doing this job, I was convinced that if I made a certain amount of money, if I made $100,000, all of the problems in my life would go away. I made the money, and it didn't seem to work like I had hoped. And I realized that for most of my life, I had lived unconsciously. I didn't know why I was doing any of the things that I was doing. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. And in 2017, much like a lot of people, I was watching a lot of Joe Rogan, listening to Joe Rogan, and I said it would be really cool to have a podcast about this. So in 2017, I started a podcast. I fell in love with it. Then the following year, I was sitting on the edge of a bed contemplating suicide because I was just so miserable and I felt so stuck. And then I ended up leaving my job a few months later and then trying to figure out how to do this and how to do it profitably for the next few years. And here we are 7 years later.
So you used a word in there that I'm sure caught the ears and attention of lots of listeners, profitably. So what was the initial thoughts about how you're going to be profitable with a podcast and where did it eventually lead you?
Initially, I think I was very naive where I just thought, it'll happen eventually. It'll happen the way it's supposed to eventually. And that just wasn't the case. I was 2 years in, so we didn't monetize for 2 years. At that point, I was $30,000 in credit card debt, riding the struggle bus. And I said to my business partner, I said, I really need to start making some money here, man, or I'm going to be in a bad place. And he said, I think we should start coaching for free. And I said, I don't know if you heard the last part of what I said, but I need to start making money. So free is good, but I need to make money. And he said, well, Kev, you've never coached in this line before. You have to build trust with our audience. You have to build belief in yourself. So I reached out to 5 people who I knew listened to the show because I had talked to them. And I said, hey, I'm interested in doing coaching. I've never done it. I will coach you for free weekly for the next 8 weeks. And there's no strings attached. And everybody I reached out to, all 5 people said yes. And I said, okay, this is something. This might be something. At the end of the 8 weeks, I said, I can't do this for free anymore. I'd love to keep coaching you. What do you think of $50 per call? And everybody said yes. So I went from making $0 to $250 a week. And that became the process of everything for us. That has been our business model since, I guess, 2019 when we started coaching people.
Very, very nice. Is there any direct monetization from the podcast itself, or is it just the podcast as a vehicle for driving up sales in other places? Which, by the way, I'm all for and highly encouraging people, but just want to see if there's anything else you're doing that is, more podcast direct.
No, we've never done ads. We've never done sponsors. We've never done affiliates. We have our own products. We sponsor ourselves, and we're kind of our own affiliates. So that's kind of the way it's worked for us.
Okay. So if you're not watching this, if you're just listening to the audio version, you're missing out that Kevin has a pretty nice studio there, a really nice background. Take us through a little bit about the evolution of your technology and how you get, like, what you started with and what you are working with today.
Yeah, in the beginning, I started with the old Audio Technica ATR 2100 mic. I have it here.
Reliable.
Yep. And then I had I believe it was also an Audio Technica little mixer, a little USB interface. I started there. I was using Audacity. Still use Audacity. Yeah, still a huge fan. In the very beginning, there was no video. So all I was doing was sitting in my living room, recording into my ATR, using Audacity, and then figuring out kind of how to do the audio editing there. Then we moved into my business partner's mother's house, and that became our first quote unquote studio. And we had a couple of inexpensive Sony cameras. We got a new mixer. We had like a really big mixer that is way overkill that nobody ever really needs. And we kept using the same mics and we kept doing that. And then eventually we upgraded to the camera I have, the Sony A7 III. That became our studio camera. For a while, we had like multi-cam shots. And then we ended up, I would say the pinnacle of the experience was at one point we had our own studio. And it was the best. We had like TVs on the wall, lights everywhere, curtains. But it's really been the same equipment throughout until we upgraded to the, I think this is the AT2020 or the AT2040 mic. Big fan of Audio-Technica.
Obviously.
So it's kind of been that. There haven't been that many technological differences. A lot of it has been the branding and then like kind of the backdrop. So I have 3D wall art. I have a bunch of lights in my studio. I have lights on the ceiling for down lighting and up lighting, and that's kind of, and I have a TV that I'm seeing you on. So it's kind of mayhem in here. Behind the scenes, it's a hot mess, but it looks good on camera, and I guess that's all that matters.
So I want to talk about that 3D wall art in just a second, but you said you put together your own studio. So one, is that where you're speaking to us from today?
No, this is from home.
Okay. So you have this studio. Is it like a commercial studio that you rent out and use with other people, or is it just something for you and your crew to use?
This was just for us. It was an old mill building. I think it was probably, I don't know, 300 square feet. They gave us free reign. They said, yeah, you can put stuff on the walls. You can do whatever we want. So yeah, it was in a mill building, and it felt really legit. There's something about turning the key, opening a door, and seeing your own studio that makes you feel super professional. So it definitely helped me in terms of the belief of what we were doing.
Very, very cool. All right, nice. And now let's talk about this 3D wall art. So again, if you're not watching this on YouTube or if you're not seeing one of the clips, please go check it out and take a look, just because it is a really fascinating backdrop that you have there. You said it was a 3D backdrop. Does that mean like you printed it yourself, or did you buy it from someone else?
I bought it on Amazon.
Okay.
I think it was like $100 for, I don't know, whatever it is, 50 square feet. And then I just used the command strips to put it on my wall. Didn't like the way it looked. So they're black. It's black wall art. I didn't like the way it looked, just black. It just looked plain to me. So then I got a bunch of lights to kind of angle off in certain directions so I could get some reflections. And then I kind of changed my lights. So I just changed my lights from whatever color it was to orange, because we're kind of in Halloween season. When we get closer to Christmas, maybe I'll do black and green and red. I don't know, black and red. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I'm always trying to change something to keep it fresh.
Very, very cool. And in fact, we'll try and get a link for you from where you got those so we can make it available for people. It's a very, very cool backdrop, and I imagine it does also help with the sound, but it just creates a very dynamic look going on behind you. What would you say, having been doing this for a while, was the biggest challenge in podcasting, or what remains the biggest challenge for you in podcasting?
Man, I think the thing that remains the biggest challenge for me now is making sure. There's so much advice out there, and there's a lot of really good advice, but figuring out what advice actually applies to us. I think we're in a different space where we have a successful business, and this is very sustainable now. So it's not like I'm necessarily clamoring for listens. I'm more focused on making sure that the episodes are really good. We don't have guests anymore, so that's kind of been a different pivot for us. So I think the hardest thing was monetizing, really, because this was the thing that was going to pay my bills. So making $1,000 a month wasn't going to be enough, because I had more bills than that, unfortunately. Now it's really sifting through the information to figure out what is the most applicable information to us that we can take and run with, and then just making sure that we're focusing on what's the 20% of stuff that's going to get us 80% of the results. That's really a big thing for us, because without the podcast, none of this exists. So we have to make sure that we're producing high quality content. And when you're doing an episode every day, it's a challenge when you have dozens of coaching clients and a 20 some odd person team to make sure that you're putting the podcast first. So I would say that's kind of the hardest thing now, is with more opportunity, you need more discipline to make sure you're doing the right things that brought you the opportunity in the first place.
Is there any software or any platforms that help you manage the podcast or keep the, trains moving on time?
I love Opus Clip. Opus Clip is great for taking your long form content and breaking it into short form. Other than that, no, not really. We use Metricool for all of our social media posting. So that makes life a little bit easier. You can just set it and forget it. You can do that in Facebook groups too. So that makes it a little bit easier. We have a Facebook group. I'm a huge fan of StreamYard. I know we're on Riverside here. Riverside's great, but StreamYard we've used for 1,000 episodes, and that's been good.
I always tell folks, like, if it worked for you, then it's the correct solution.
100%.
I like to suggest certain things. I prefer certain things, but really when somebody says, oh, I see you use this, do I have to? It's like, is what you're doing working? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Stick with it.
Yeah. I tell people that all the time about Zoom. They're like, well, I need to upgrade from Zoom. It's like, just do Zoom. If it's easy for you now, do it. And if you're here in 50 episodes, then you can upgrade. You don't have to do it the second.
Right. I've also, seen the folks who are like, oh, but I got to spend money on Riverside. It's like, but do you? Like, use it. And then if you're making money and you want to upgrade later, go for it. Just keep doing what works for now. And focus on the content. Don't be so obsessed with the technology, even though, of course, we're here on a show about podcasting technology. As a reminder, everybody, we're chatting with Kevin Palmieri. He is podcaster, speaker, and coach, Next Level University Podcast. Of course, we'll have a link to that and all the places where you can find Kevin here in the show notes. Before we let you go, we have a couple of questions we like to ask everybody on the show and get your take. So one is there a place in the podcasting world, whether it's from the producer experience, the listener experience, anything like that, where you'd like to see some improvement?
I would love to see improvement in terms of the analytics. I think right now the analytics is just the Wild West, and it's hard to read. You don't really know what means what. I think analytics need to come way up.
That's fair. I know a lot of folks working on that, and the 2.0 crowd is trying to get in there and do a little bit better. Some of it is just a limitation of the technology. Some of it is regulatory limitations and privacy concerns, but I've always had, in my days of production and consulting, analytics and having a better understanding of our show is always a sticking point for people. So I can totally get that. Is there any technology on your wish list, whether it's a piece of equipment, some sort of software, whether it's something that exists or something you'd like to see created that you're yearning for?
Ooh, I'm very much looking forward to the days where the studio is bigger and there's a multicam. It wouldn't be like a live multicam, but I would like to have multiple cameras in the studio just because I think that makes for a nice dynamic product.
It does. And in fact, I don't know if you saw recently at the time we were recording this, Rode just unveiled their Rodecaster Video, which is a multicam video switcher. And while it has scenes that you could set up and you can switch the cameras very easily, it also can do AI switching in that, right? It'll jump to whoever's talking. So that's it seems like if it works the way it claims it's going to work, it's an amazing product. And it seems like that could solve that problem for you that you're discussing right now. So we'll try and throw a link to that in the show notes as well, in case anybody else wants to check out the Rodecaster Video. I am drooling for it. Hopefully somebody will, want to put it on my holiday wish list this year.
The cost, the price?
About $1,200.
That's not terrible, all things considered.
No, I mean, if it lives up to the hype, it's well worth it. If not, yeah, but Rode hasn't put out a terrible product yet, so I have very high hopes for it. All right, and lastly, do you have a podcast that you listen to? In other words, is there a show that as soon as it comes out, you stop listening to other stuff, or you can't go a day or two without listening to this show when new episodes drop?
I know I always sound terrible when I say this, but no, I don't really listen to anything else because I'm trying to review ours to make sure I'm getting better. And with one every day, it's hard for me to do anything else other than that. So no.
That is fair. Is there anybody or any shows you just want to mention or give some love to while you're here?
Oh, man. I would say Grow the Show is a great show. Kevin Chemeldon. That's a great show. Mark Asquith has a show. I don't remember the name of it.
Oh, Mark has a bunch of really good shows. He just launched a new one with Danny Brown.
Those are pretty good.
He was doing one on his own for a long time. He also does a Star Wars one. So
Any of those, specifically the podcasting ones, any of those I would recommend for sure.
Anything from Mark Asquith, deal. Have no problem putting a link to Mark here on the show and giving him some extra love. Well, Kevin Palmieri, podcaster, speaker, coach, host of Next Level University podcast. Please check out his stuff. We'll put links to everything that he does, including his coaching work, if you are in the market for that. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us here on the show today.
Thank you for having me, my friend. I appreciate it very much.